from the earlier designs where when you let off the control, it just snaps the brake right on, and that's a lot of torque that's moving that rotor absorbs, and over a period of time, it'll be an early failure point. So with all that said, that's my 2 cents worth in it. You can't go wrong with Yaesu, I don't think, but just do your math and figure out what you need, and always go heavier. With all that said, Tom, thanks a lot. Great question. K8RRT7.
Okay, K8RRT, AB8RL. Okay, Tim, man, you put a lot of good pointers in there. One last question, and I think everyone could benefit by this. How would you describe what is wind load? What is wind load? You hear factors at 10 square feet of wind load, 4.6 square feet wind load. Can you explain that in a little detail over?
The wind load is just very simple. The wind load itself is what the surface area of that antenna, the size of the antenna, how many elements is on the antenna, how big the tubing is on the antenna, how long the boom is on the antenna, how much surface area do you have for that wind to grab a hold of that antenna. That's your wind loading. That's the way I've been taught, and the way I've had it described to me. It's the surface area of the antenna. Like if you look at my antenna system, I have it looks like the biggest antenna on top of the tower. It's a 36-foot boom with full-size 20-meter elements. I have a 24-foot boom, the antenna underneath it. Now, you would think the shorter boom, less wind load, the longer wind load, the longer antenna would have more wind load, but in fact, with the second antenna that's underneath the big antenna, the 24-foot one actually grabs more wind because of the coils that are on the elements on the 2-on-40, the 2-on-30, that adds more wind resistance, so therefore it has the higher wind loading, so we put it closest to the top of the tower. And the other antenna, which had less wind loading, which it looks kind of, you would think you would need to be closest to the top of the tower to take the torque off the mast. It's actually on top because there's less wind loading. So if that makes any sense, the more metal you got in there to grab the wind, the more torque you're going to have. Therefore, more wind loading you're going to have. So I hope that's simple enough. K8RRT73.
Okay, Tim, thank you very much for that explanation there. That was my understanding as well. At the end here, I'm going to give a very good reference to find out how you can calculate or figure out your antenna you have and what the wind loading is. There's a good reference online that I can refer you to. Okay, next up on the list would be Bill, W4BPT. Well, he's in and out, okay? Okay, next is W8RLG, Bob in Scott Depot. Bob, do you have any experience with rotors? Over.
Well, good evening, everyone. No, I have no experience with rotors whatsoever, and very little experience with antennas as far as that goes. So I'll just sit back this evening and see what I can hear and maybe learn something. Thanks. W8RLG.
Okay, very good, Bob. W8RLG, AB8RL. You sound good on that, the FT3 you're on, and hopefully your first HF antenna might be a tower with a rotor on it. Okay, next up on the list is Mike in Charleston, KE8MGA, AB8RL.
Hello, greetings. I have no experience with rotors. Actually, I feel pretty high tech. And recently installing a half-wave 2-meter antenna to hook up to my HT. So that's about to extend my knowledge. So I'll just sit back and listen. KE8MGA.
Okay, Mike, KE8MGA, AB8RL. Well, thank you. Nice to hear you on the net also. Thank you for joining. Appreciate it. Next is John in Poca. John, you've been around for a long time. What's your experience and recommendations for rotors? KG8AI, AB8RL.
zero experience with rotors and directional antennas. The closest I'd come would be my son KB8RZG has just had a 4-element 2-meter Yagi up for a while, and he was just using a TV rotor, which of course you're looking at a small antenna without a lot of wind loading. And he's been successful with that, but I don't know how much bigger you could go with a TV rotor and have it survive. But no experience, no knowledge, gaining knowledge by listening to the net. KG8AI, back to net control.
Hey, very good, John. Well, thank you very much for your comments and participating in the net this evening. Glad to have you from Poca. Okay, the next station I know is using a vertical antenna. Probably doesn't have a rotor, but over to you, Steve, WW8RT, AV8RL.
Good evening, Tom, and everyone on the net. WW8RT Steve. You are correct, Tom. I am using a vertical, and my experience with the rotors are twofold. Number one is I helped Tim carry his out from the house to the tower, and number two is when you push on the brakes, the pads push against the rotor and stop the car. And with that, that's most of my experience with rotors. I'd also like to maybe make a real quick mention that if somebody wants to come to our virtual meeting, I'll have Echolink on, so they could listen into our meeting as well. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Net Control, WW8RT, clear.
Okay, WW8RT, AV8RL. Very good, Steve. And the call sign Echolink is under on the local repeater here, and it's accessible from anywhere, is WV8AR-R, WV8AR-R. Okay, good evening to Randy in South Charleston, KE8LSN. Any knowledge of rotors you'd like to share with the group, AV8RL?
Tom, I am sitting here just trying to learn a very interesting topic. Thank you.
Okay, Randy, you're dropping in a little bit in and out, but I copy you're here to learn. Very good. Good evening to Tony in Sissonville. I know you're using a wire antenna for the time being, but may be putting up a rotor, an antenna with a rotor in the future. Anything that you know and would like to share with the group on the topic? KD8A from AV8RL.
Well, good evening. My experience with rotors begins and ends in childhood. That was the little box that set up on top of the TV that if you wanted to change channels, you had to turn the knob on it to one of the stickers that was stuck on it for one of the 3 channels that we got at the time. So that's about it. But yeah, I'd love at some point to get a tower up in the future and get a directional antenna up on it. So I'm sitting here soaking in the information. Hope everybody's doing well, and I'll send it back to Net Control, KD8A.
Okay, Tony, very good. Thank you for checking in. Glad to have you. Next up is Adam from Bristol, Tennessee, N4NT, AV8RL.
Well, good evening, everybody on the net. Well, before I go on to my experience with rotors, let me apologize on the YouTube recording. I chopped off the first few minutes of the net because I had put my receiver radio on the wrong frequency, and happened to notice that I think I've got the bulk of it, and I'll go to my backup recording and see if it got everything, but I'm hoping that it did. But if it didn't, I'll trim the upload to YouTube so you don't have to sit and listen to a few minutes of dead air. I need to program that frequency in the memory so I don't do that in the future. But yeah, my experience with rotors, let me reset. It pretty much consists of just doing 2-meter 440 stuff right now, which the awesome thing about it is the antennas are so light that you can use the rotors like the gentleman before me mentioned that you used on your TV, and they're fairly inexpensive. But I do agree with the sentiment that if you're going to put a tower up and put something beefy up in the air, that you go a notch above what they recommend. But the good thing about doing VHF UHF stuff is the antennas are really lightweight, and the rotors are a little more affordable. If you've ever shot rotors, you know what I'm talking about. I'm standing here actually in my backyard right now on my patio, and looking up at a couple dual band beams that I purchased, Cushcraft, and I've got one turn for FM, one turn for sideband, and both of them on the same rotor, and they're just facing opposite of each other, so north on one is south on the other, that kind of thing. And the little rooftop tower that I have them attached to, I probably have a total of around $500 or so in the whole setup, which, if you're familiar with rotor pricing, that's on the inexpensive side. I am looking toward doing something different with HF, but I've been looking at those hex beams, and they're fairly lightweight, and you can pretty much turn those with the same rotor. Let me reset. Of course, I don't mean same rotor, all the antennas on one, but the wingspan of that thing, I think, is about 14 to 20 feet, somewhere in that neighborhood, and only weighs about that much in pounds. So it's doable. You know, if you don't have a big tower situation, something, you're going to spend the money on the antenna, of course, but that's pretty much the norm with any HF antenna beam-wise if you purchase it as opposed to making it. But so maybe in the future, as I delve into this, I'll share my experiences with you. I'm hoping to put up a tower and put something on top of it and go from there, but I haven't quite made it there. I've been a ham for since 1992, and this is about as far as I've got with that. Most of what I've put up's been dipoles. But good to hear everybody tonight, and I'll turn it back over to Net Control. 7-3 is N4NT.
Okay, N4NT and the net, AB8RL. Very good, Adam. Well, thank you for all your comments on your antennas and your experiences since the early 90s. I've been dealing with rotors with on-end some type of a tower since 1968, or some 54 years, and 52 years, that is. And I'll talk about that here in a few minutes. Okay, next up on the list is Bob in Cincinnati. Good evening, Bob. Thank you for joining the net this evening. Any experience with rotors? W8CRO from AB8RL.
Good evening, and thank you. Very limited experience. I used to have a tri-band Yagi. Actually, it was 3 Yagis, 6 meters, 2 meters, and 70 centimeters, and I rotated it with a Yaesu G450. It worked very, very well for me. That's the only rotor I've ever owned, the only antenna I've ever owned that I needed to turn, and it worked very well, but circumstances changed a few years ago, and I needed to sell it. So that's my limited experience, but I'm enjoying the conversation and the information. So hope everyone has a good weekend. Everyone stays healthy. W8CRO back to net.
W8CRO in the net, AB8RL. Very good, Bob, and I hope you return again next week. Glad to have you from Cincinnati. And very good on the Yaesu G450. I'll give my comments on the topic at the end, but I'm using also a Yaesu G450A, which is brand new. Just bought it probably less than a month or two ago, and I'll comment on that in a few minutes. So the G450 is a very good, inexpensive rotor. I enjoyed very much. Okay, over to John in Indiana. AF9MS from AB8RL.
AB8RL in the group. This is AF9MS. Have no experience with rotors. I live in an HOA, and so all my antennas are in the attic, and I can't rotate any of them because I don't have room. So I've got a wire and a couple of verticals, and that's about it. And I guess that's all it's ever going to be for me. So that's the way it is. I'll say 7-3 to everyone. This is AF9MS, back to net control.
Okay, John, AF9MS, AB8RL. Very good. Well, you know, I've been licensed since 1968, and when you can go through the 60s and the 70s and 80s and the 90s for 30, 40 years, and you never heard a word about HOAs, but you sure do now nationwide. So that was sure a situation that developed here in the recent years. Glad to have you. Check in again next week. Okay, good evening to Matt and Willing, KA8YEZ. Matt, any experience with rotors from AB8RL?
Okay, so good evening to you and everybody else on that. Very little experience. Let's see, we've been at this house for about 12, 13 years and do not have a tower at this location yet. But the old house had one probably for 20 some odd years, and I forget what kind of rotor it was. It was something AES had on sale. Worked real good. Ended up getting a little bit of a lightning hit, and it kind of fried something in the rotor as far as what direction it was, so I wasn't too sure where it was pointed. But it worked. And had a ham that was moving out of the area quite a few years ago, and I bought a ham 4 off of him. It's never been up. At least I've never had it up. He had it up, worked fine, so once I get a tower up, probably be putting a ham 4 up. Heard a lot of good things about that one, so can't offer too much. And kind of on the side note for those up here in the northern part of West Virginia and Pennsylvania, there's a slight risk of severe thunderstorms tomorrow, issued by the Storm Prediction Center. Back in that, everybody have yourself a good weekend. Kilowatt Alpha 8 Yankee Echo Zulu.
KA8YEZ, AB8RL. Very good, Matt. Thank you for your comments. And the high gain ham 4 is probably one of the most popular rotors that I know have been in amateur radio for many, many years. It's a very, very good rotor, that's for sure. Okay, let's go to Kyle here, locally in Hurricane, NY8S in Hurricane from AB8RL. Good evening.
Hey, Tom. Hopefully this is better. I was trying to use my FT3 in direct mode, and I've got it plugged in. And I think that was my source of interference. I'm just going to check with you real quick, see if that was.
Okay, now you sound great. Go ahead.
Tom, are you getting me? NY8S?
Yeah, NY8S, AB8RL. You sound very good. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. And I just wanted to correct you. I'm in Chicago at my brother's house right now, but as far as the rotors go, I don't have any experience with them. I'm renting a house right now, so can't really try to invest in any towers or anything to get a rotor, but I would in the future like to eventually get a tower with a rotor, so I'm just basically learning with everyone else right now. Back to you, Tom. AB8RL, NY8S.
Okay, NY8S, Chicago from AB8RL. Very, very good, Kyle. Glad to have you join us visiting your brother there in Chicago. Boy, it shows the flexibility here of the CF4 FM and the PDNs and the Wires X system that you can connect from just about anywhere very easily. So thanks for joining from Illinois this evening. Okay, next is Brian, KE8ICS in Wheeling. Good evening, AB8RL.
Good evening, Tom. Great night as usual. And good evening, everybody. And KC8FZH, John said hello to everybody. He's already passed out. So, well, he wants me to pass the hello along to you guys there. I have no experience with rotors as far as ham radio is concerned, but I know I've used one for a TV antenna before, and it was amazing how many channels you pick up. So I'm sure it's the same principle. If you can rotate it around, I'm sure you can get a lot more stuff in. So other than that, that's my only experience. So other than that, everybody take care. Have a great Friday. Finally made it. So everybody take care. 7-3s. AB8RL, K8ICS.
K8RRT.
Okay, KE8ICS in the net, AB8RL. Very good, Matt. Thank you for your comments. And I'll be sending you an email a little later about next week as well. And also K8RRT's in there. So go ahead, Tim. It's all yours from AB8RL.
All right, Tom, thanks for coming back to me there. I didn't want to interrupt, but I did have more information that I was searching for that during my last check-in there. Another thing that you need to think about when choosing a rotor is the K factor. And the K factor is the weight of the mast and the total weight of the antenna or antennas. Now, a lot of rotor manufacturers do not give you a K factor. Yaesu does. It is important for you to figure your K factor because that also goes into which rotor that you need to use. So a lot of the manufacturers don't do that. So the K factor is another point of the weight of the mast and the weight of the antennas. And of course, a lot of people use thrust bearings to help hold the weight where the rotor is not stressed as far as the downforce of the weight being a load. You know, if you don't use a thrust bearing, it's going to be load bearing. So that's just another point that depending on your application and how you're doing it, that's why I like Yaesu. They tell you the whole story. And they give you recommendations for everything you're doing because they don't want you to have a failure. So not only do you have wind loading, you not only have the wind loading, which is dealing with the twist, the twist of the antenna, you also have the downforce of the K factor is what they call it. And I'm no mathematician, y'all know that, but this is just stuff that I learned by building 2 towers and went along with it, the advisement I had. So just bear in mind the K factor goes into it as well if you're not using a thrust bearing. So with all that said, back to you, Tom, K8RRT. Thank you.
Okay, Tim, K8RRT in the net, AB8RL. Well, thank you very much for that information on the K factor. And when I just recently bought this Yaesu G450, even on that rotor, which is considered a lightweight rotor, they did have extensive material about the K factor in the instruction manual, and that's the first time I ever seen it, and I was never aware of it. And when I put up my recent antenna, I used a thrust bearing for the very, very first time, even though my total antennas are not all that heavy, probably less than 50 pounds. Okay, next on the list is Jim in New Martinsville, N8KLQ. Any experiences with rotors? AB8RL.
Yeah, good evening, everybody on the net. My name is Jim. The call's N8KLQ. Yes, I remember years ago, a friend of mine, he's a scientist now, K8YFA, had up on top of a hill back of Glendale, West Virginia, and he had a hilltop locale that was second to none. Then he put power with a set of without touching them so good that they claimed that the curvature of the Earth was screwing him. It's kind of comical. Before that, I used to go to his house back in the 70s. He had the TV, and oh my, he got more stuff than you can shake a stick at. I mean, anywhere from, it was just phenomenal. But yeah, that was probably my best experience with rotors. So anyhow, back to that in 8K. Okay, Jim, N8KLQ. What was Ted's call sign over? Can you repeat that again? Yeah, okay, Jim, you're breaking up a little bit. What was the call sign of Ted you were talking about over? Yeah, his call sign was Kilo Alpha 8, Yankee Foxtrot Alpha, KAYFA, West Virginia. He's a silent key now. Okay, very good, Jim. Thank you for that information. Okay, Terry, AA8WZ. You know, Terry, I've been at your QTH many a times, helped you with a lot of stuff, but, you know, we never talked about rotors, and I'm not even sure what you have. But you obviously made a great selection, whichever one you're using. AA8WZ, AB8RL.
Good evening, Tom, everyone on the net. Everybody's sounding real good. Terry, AAAWC, Alpha 8 Whiskey Zulu. We're in Cross Lanes, West Virginia. I use a Ham 4 by High Gain, Tom. I've had it for a long time, 10 years plus. Use a Roan tower about 50 feet and a 3-element stepper. I usually have it in the 180-degree mode or the bi-directional mode for the stepper, and don't turn the antenna so much, but every time I've used the Ham 4, it's been very good, and never had any issues with it. Getting used to using it, holding the brake, and sending it into the right direction, and having it calibrated is key, in my opinion. And I usually keep it in the north to northeast direction. But as far as using the Ham 4, it's very good. The rotor, I haven't had any issues with it. And at this point, I would say it's really good for me. So we'll send it back to net. Everybody's sounding really good this evening. Good evening from AAWC. Back to you, Tom.
Okay, AA8WZ in the net, AB8RL. Very good, Terry. Very good on the Ham 4 rotor, which, as we mentioned earlier, is very commonplace for most of the amateur antennas, tri-banders that are used today. Okay, before I make my comments, let's stand by. That's the end of the list. Do we have any additional stations wishing to check in to the West Virginia System Fusion Information Net? Call Net Control now, AB8RL.
AB8RL, and you wait. Here is Kilo 4, Mike India Charlie.
November 8 Kilo Foxtrot Alpha.
Okay, I copied the following stations: NU8LL, Mike and Hurricane, K4 MIC, K8 KFA. There was a station that said short-term mobile, but I missed the information. Try again, over.
November 8, Yankee Mike Tango, short time mobile.
Okay, copy N8YMT, short time mobile. Thank you for checking in. Okay, the next station here may have some good knowledge on rotors. NU8LL. Good evening from AB8RL.
Good evening, everybody. This is NU8LL, Mike, currently in Taze Valley. Growing up, used an Alliance Model 73, which, as I'm reading on the Storms Rotor Service webpage, I believe it was like 1994 when they quit producing them. Well, we just decommissioned it a couple weeks ago. Had a pair of stacked 15 element 2 meter with that set of beams. Spun that thing hundreds and hundreds of times. On repairing and fixing up. Had two of the high gain controllers. Took pieces between the two and manufactured a couple parts. Had to make some of the control knobs. It's got some finger knobs. They were sun down and 3D print or drew up the drawings for the add the temple. All those got to do a little sanding. So that'll be a little bit of an update. Swapped out some. Hold on.
Yeah, NU8LL, EB8RL. You on low power, but boy, for being Taze Valley, you're not getting into the repeater too well. Over.
Let me see if I can figure that out. Gotta remember how to get to the setting.
Yeah, we've had a lot of HTs check in through the repeater, and they're all stronger than you are right now. Over.
Mike, if you tap the TX PWR button on the FT400, that'll cycle it through the settings.
All right, I'm on high power now. Does that make a difference?
I believe so, yes. Go ahead, continue.
Yeah, I'm down in a little hole here. Anyway, I don't know what you got out of that or not, but Alliance Model 73, very, very common, popular rotor with a 13 element, or about 30 elements, two 15 element 2 meter beams stacked together. That's what I played with as through childhood and teen years. I recently decommissioned it. Just took that tower down a week or so ago, and used a ham 2 on my own for many years, and recently acquired a tail twister too. If all goes well, that'll go up in the air within a year at a new property. So, and I've been rebuilding some rotor controllers lately, and looking into the project of adding a GPS and accelerometer, as well as to feed into an Arduino, and then modifying one of the controllers to have the Arduino in it. I think K3NG, I think, is the name of the guy that came up with the original plans. There's a whole entire following with it. But the accelerometer would allow the electronic controller to dynamically adjust the speed that it rotates the antenna to minimize the wear and tear on the rotor, as well as the torque on all of the U-bolts and such. So we can slow the thing down as it gets closer to its target, and be very accurate on where it's always pointed. So if it happens to slip, the GPS unit will actually know, electronic compass will know exactly where the antenna is pointed, whether the mast is attached or slipped or not. Hopefully all those things play out, and good evening, everybody. NU8LL.
Okay, NU8LL, AB8RL. Very good, Mike. Solid copy of that transmission. And very fine. On the Alliance, they called it the HD73. And I have one myself, so sometime in the near future I'd like to talk to you about that. But I have one here in the garage with the controller. Okay, next on the list is K4MIC. Come back with your name and QTH, and any comments on the rotor conversation here this evening. AB8RL.
Well, good evening to you and everybody else on the net there. K4MIC. Name here is Mike, and location is Pendleton County, West Virginia, Sugar Grove, West Virginia. And sorry, apologies for being late into the net this evening. I had the Pendleton County Aries net this evening at 8:30, so I was kind of trying to get checked into that first and then get over here, catch the tail end of this. And my experiences with rotors have been limited. I've had a few directional antennas in the past up on a short tower in the backyard that wasn't very heavy and wasn't a whole lot to turn, so I went cheap and went with the TV rotors. And currently I got a mast on the side of my shed, my ham shack. That's about the top of it's probably 20 feet, and the rotor's at about 10 feet. And I've got a Omni on top of it that I have that I'm using for my node radio, node antenna gateway here for Wires X. And then I have a 11 element Comet beam that for 2 meters that I use for local repeaters around here. Other than that, I don't have much experience with rotors. At some point in time, I would like to. I'd like to get a little bit more fancy, but for right now, that's as far as I can help you. So then I'll turn it back over to you. This is K4MIC.
Okay, Mike, K4MIC, Sugar Grove, West Virginia, AB8RL. Very good. Thank you for those comments. I am glad to have you check into the net, even though it's a little bit later. No problem at all. Glad to have you. Okay, next on the list is Bill, N8KFA in Shadyside, Ohio. Any experience with rotors for the net? AB8RL.
Thanks for the exchange of information, everybody. And sorry to get a late check-in here. Slept through the one last week. I apologize for that. But no, not yet. I do have a Yaesu G450 I picked up on sale, and planning on putting it in service, so I would say within a month. It's been sitting around for about a year. Just haven't had the occasion yet. And what will go up there will be a dual band 2 meter, 70 centimeter, and then I'm planning on stacking on top of that a 6 meter. I just have to make a decision on that, or I'm going to homebrew it or buy it. But I like the information Yaesu sends out. There's plenty of information on the net, but I agree with the gentleman. More information is better, and the K factor is something that does matter.
Okay, Bill, and N8KFA. Anything else?
It's just a big old thunderstorm around here right now and just kind of caught me off guard. But I went to handheld, put everything else to ground. So, no, thanks for having the net and appreciate all the information.
Okay, very good. Okay, well, there's another G450 rotor in the group here this evening. That's the third one. Up until about a month ago, I never heard of the model, never would have considered it. Okay, next on the list, if you're in there, Mobile, I know you were short time. Jay in Columbus, NAYMT, AB8RL.
Good evening, sir, and thanks for running the net there, and good evening, everybody on the net. Well, I guess I'm the host for Child for Eroticy. As far as experience with rotors, I've had quite a few experiences with rotors. However, I've never had a setup with a rotor. However, on the technical side, I seem to be, or used to, I haven't here as of late, but have been one of the people to come to, and I have rebuilt and repaired plenty of rotors from uses to ham-fors and such. So, I've had the inner workings. I've played with those, and only a couple control boxes that I've ever messed with, but other than that, I have put one on a tower and used one in a setup aside from somebody else's house. So, nothing to use since then they want to.
Okay, Jay, N8YMT, AB8RL. Very good. I know you're very knowledgeable of antennas as well and repeaters and good reference for a lot of information for us on here. Thanks for joining us and checking in this evening. Okay, that's the end of the list I have. Do we have any additional stations? Any lurkers out there that would like to join the net? The West Virginia System Fusion Information Net, call net control, AB8RL.
KB8ZIO, Scott Cross Lanes.
Okay, copy Scott and Cross Lanes, KB8ZIO. Okay, Scott, you're next up on the list. I know you don't have a tire nor a rotor, but you're hopefully learning. And over to you for comments from AB8RL.
Well, you are very correct on that. I don't have anything like that, but if there was a Santa Claus, I would write him a letter for one. It really would be super cool to have a nice tower with a antenna and rotor system. Yep. If old Saint Nick existed, I would ask for that. Other than that, Tom, that's really all I got.
Okay, Scott, KB8ZIO, AB8RL. Very good. Hope you're enjoying your antenna and radio, making a lot of contacts. When you need some help with a logging program or FT8, just let me know. Be glad to help you. Okay, do we have any additional check-ins for the net? Call now, AB8RL standing by. Nothing heard. Okay, I'll give my experiences with a rotor. I've been in ham radio for 52 years, and I've never bought a brand new rotor before. My rotors have always been used. I've always bought them for about $100. My last rotor was a TR44 rotor. Maybe that was made by High Gain. I bought it for $100 off of ham up in Portsmouth, Ohio, and I used it for many, many years, probably 15, 20 years on the tower. Worked quite well. But it's an old rotor. I recently took the antennas down and painted the tower, renovated everything, put it back up, and it wouldn't work. Due to its age, I just decided it was time to part with it. And I had, in my mind, was thinking of buying a High Gain. I had a make and model in mind. I called one of the very, very major local distributors of amateur radio product, and he asked me, well, what kind of antenna are you going to be turning with it? I told him a TA33 and a Telerex 6 5-element beam. Well, he said, let me give you a recommendation. And he gave me the recommendation of the Yaesu G450A. He says there's quite a few of us here in the store that use them. It's a very good rotor. We've had a lot of success with them. We've had very few returns of them. And in addition, it saved me probably $200 to $300 compared to what I originally thought I was going to pay for a rotor. This rotor, I think brand new now, is only about $298, almost $300, no more than about $300. And that's a pretty inexpensive rotor. It handles 10 square feet of antenna area. My TA33 and 5-element 6-meter beam only takes up about 5.5 to 6 square feet of wind load, and this rotor does 10, so it's more than enough to handle the antennas. In addition, it's only a 7-pound rotor, and I have a fold-over crank-up tower, and weight is everything. And you may want to also consider, well, how heavy is the rotor going to be? This rotor is only about 7 pounds. There are rotors out there 17 to 20, 30, and 40 pounds in weight. They're very, very heavy, the bigger you get. So that's what I'm using here, the G450A from Yaesu. Never considered a Yaesu until that was recommended to me from one of the prominent distributors of amateur radio equipment locally. Okay, and there's a reference online about wind loading, and I found it under Norm's rotor repair, NORMS, Norm's rotor repair. He has an area of rotor help, and he has a very nice section of quite an extensive list of makes and models of antennas, and he lets you know what the wind load is of that particular antenna, so you can choose the correct rotor. That's Norm's rotor repair, easily found online. Okay, that's all I have for the net. Before closure here, we'll stand by for, again, any late check-ins or any last additional comments. Call net control, AB8RL.
Tom, how about just one more comment?
Okay, there might have been 2 stations in there, but I copied you there, Tim, first. K8RRT. Go ahead.
All right, I got a question, and everybody can just take this with them and think about it, and maybe we can visit it at some other time. But this goes right along with the topic of the night, the question, Tom, which was a great question. And that is, should you pin the mast in the rotor? And what I mean by that is, you put the mast in the rotor throat, and some rotors have 2 U-bolts, some have 4, some have 6 to hold that mast. So there's a question out there that I've listened at Dayton at some of the meetings that I was blessed to go to, and it was a big topic amongst some big gun stations that have 5 and 6 towers and their contest stations, and I sit in the corner and listen to those guys go at it and their opinions on whether you should pin a rotor or not. And I had always been of the opinion, yeah, you should pin that rotor, that mast, because in that big windstorm, you don't want your antenna or your mast twisting and your rotor being out of calibration, right? So that was my opinion early on, but I've since changed my opinion, and both of my rotors are not pinned. So there's a question out there that it's kind of like buying a car. What's the best car, or what's the best air conditioner, or what's the best whatever we go to purchase, or what's the best practice? And there's all kinds of opinions, but that's one that everybody can think about when they go to do a rotor job and put up their array. Should I drill that mast and put a bolt through it and through that rotor to hold it in place, or will I save my rotor if that derecho comes through and jerks a hold of my antenna system and puts massive amount of stress on my rotor? Would I be better off that twisting in my rotor and later on recalibrating my setup or replacing the rotor? So there's a question out there for everybody just to think about, and there's really no right or wrong answer because I've heard both sides of it. So KRT 73. Good evening, everyone.
Hey Tim, very good. That's a good comment, and I read something just in the last day or two in my readings about pinning a rotor, and they say don't pin a rotor if it's not designed to be pinned with a manufacturer hole through the clamp. But the one rotor that does allow for that is the high gain tail twister. They actually give you the pin that you can put through your mast, and it's designed for one. But if it's not designed, they say do not do so. The other comment I'd like to make in addition to that is when you get rotor cable, you normally, if you get six conductor, 8 conductor, you're going to have 2 wires that are heavier than the others. And the instructions of the rotor will generally advise you to use the heavier wires on certain pins because it carries more current. So pay attention to that. It's for a purpose that rotor wire comes with 2 conductors that are heavier than the other remaining. But I noticed here on the Yaesu G450A, it only uses 4 wires. That's the least amount of wires I've seen a antenna rotor use for. Okay, did we have another station in there, either wanting to check in or with a comment? Call now. AB8RL, standing by.
Kilo Charlie 8, Zulu Romeo Echo, Larry.
Okay, KC8ZRE Larry. Kenna, you're up. Any information or experiences with rotors, Larry? Back to you.
I won AM 4, the other one's the Alliance. I have so other than that, I've been good net. I've been listening the whole time. So with the antennas. Other than that, that's about it. Plan on putting the rotor where I can access the ground. I'm not going to put the high towers.
Okay, Larry, KC8ZREAB8RL. You're a little bit marginal into the repeater right now. I didn't copy too much of that. What kind of antenna are you using on your system there?
Right now, I've got a homemade dual band J-pole, coaxial J-pole.
Okay. Does that give you any gain or no?
It does on VHF, but I don't think it does on UHF at all.
Okay. I think if you had a little gain antenna, it would probably help you out. But you were fairly marginal in that transmission. But sure, thank you for joining and checking in. I did hear you say about a high gain for. You want to try a real quick summary again? I'm copying you right now. Try that again. Over.
I'll have a 14 element Yagi up for UHF and a large no,
well, you're just on the edge. Not good enough for a solid copy. But thank you for trying anyway, and glad to have you check in. Okay, do we have any additional check-ins or comments for the net? Call net control now, AB8RL. Okay, nothing hurts, so we'll now move to closure. This is AB8RL, Net Control for the West Virginia Fusion Information Net. I certainly appreciate everybody who checked in tonight and welcome you all back again next Thursday at 8 p.m. for the West Virginia System Fusion Information Net. This net is now closed with a total of 24 check-ins at 9:16 p.m. This is AB8RL Net Control saying 73s good night and releasing all frequencies nodes back to normal amateur use.